everyone, Dustin Zahner with Creating the Difference. We're back with another video today, and actually a format that I don't believe we've ever done before. We're actually going to be taking a look at all of my shots from the PBA LBC National Championship that's going on in Wauwatosa, Wisconsin. I was actually able to bowl really, really well at this event, so we wanted to sort of walk you through my process in terms of what I'm thinking about and, the thought process behind, the moves that I'm making, or, staying mentally in check when you are bowling well, especially in an event like this. And that we'll talk about that more later. And then lastly, we'll talk about some things that I was able to reflect on when I went back and watched the footage here when I was putting this video together. We'll talk about some things like that, and that will make more sense towards the end of the video. I'll point out some things that I was able to think about at the end of the event. So the PBA LBC, we'll go ahead and start the video here. The PBA LBC pattern is 42 feet and 28.7 mils. And the first shot, of course, I throw it way right. Never want to start with a split. That's mentally something that I never want to do. But I was able to pick it up and go back on the left lane. So the pattern itself, 42 feet, 28 mils, 5.22 to 1. So not super difficult, but definitely not like a house shot where your ratios are usually somewhere in the range of like 10 to 15 to 1. Not the hardest thing in the world, but definitely not the easiest. So the ball I'm throwing is a Venom Shock. Before I went to the event, I did all my services, and that ball was at 2,000 grit True Cut. So my look on the fresh was actually pretty decent. I usually like to bowl when the lanes start to transition, usually because that means they get easier. But for this event specifically, I actually had a really, really good look on the fresh. That shot there where I 9-pinned, got it to the right a little early, and was able to come back on the right lane and throw a good shot. So some things that I'm thinking about, especially there, is like I see my ball motion, I see how the ball's going through the pins. I know I have the right ball in my hand. Like that last shot in the left lane, I did exactly the opposite of what I did where I 9-pinned. I missed in, caught the hold, and it just laid there. So I know I have the right ball in my hand. So that's number one. Number two, as I finish this game off, I'm in the mindset of, okay, I'm about to shoot 260. So I'm probably not going to make a ball change, but I'll have a look at something. So right here, I'm throwing a track stealth, and obviously that looked quite a bit different than the previous shot with the shock, or I guess any shot that game with the shock. So going into game 2, you switch pairs every game. So I'm going to start in the same part of the lane that I finished in, and threw a good shot and went through the pins the right way. So let's get a read on the right lane and another 9-pin. So I thought I threw that one pretty decent. So we just make the spare and move on. So the PBA LBC, you're actually limited to 6 balls, which I'm a big fan of. I feel like it really levels the playing field and doesn't allow you to bring 12 balls in the center. You have to make those 6 that you have work. So I don't use a spare ball, so I throw reactive at all of my spares, and I throw it straight at most of them. I hook at a couple, but not very many, and that will make sense right here. I'm actually going to hook at this spare because of the double wood. Got to get the back pin out, so we move on. We've gotten this far in the video, and I haven't mentioned the coveted prize for the PBA LBC event. The coveted prize is the Duke, or the Dookie Trophy, and $25,000 for the Open Classic Scratch Division. I did notice that this pair was slightly tighter down lane, so I moved in slightly, but not much. I really focused on not having the launch angles as open. You can see there, like that one was a little open and it barely got back. Same with that one. Like that shot looked decent and it just barely ever hooked. So I actually really like that one on my hand in wrap 10. So make the spare and we move on. 246 that game, so that puts me at plus 115. Then we move to the quote end pair of the LBC. So the LBC is actually 6 games, and you move every game, like I said. So I think, in my own opinion, that really levels the playing field. And how I made that spare is it's gonna come back to actually bite me later, but we'll talk about that when it comes. So you move every game. I feel like that really levels the playing field in terms of, not being able to really wall up a pair, so to speak, and make it super easy. So with that being said, I'm a massive fan of this format. 4 people on a pair, so it goes pretty quick, moving every single game. So big fan of this format. Claps to the LBC and the PBA for the format that they have put together. So let's talk about this for a second. I'm going to rewind just a little bit, and we'll talk about this shot here. This is kind of weird, honestly, how this one went through the pins and how the pins fell. So my first shot on this lane, I believe I wrapped 10. Yeah, so I wrapped 10. The next shot on this lane, I almost 2-8-10. And watch the 10 pin fall. I didn't realize the pin fell because I turned my back to it. It falls super slow. I'm like, oh no, here I go, 2-8-10. But I was able to actually go back and look. It's like, oh, it fell, so we're good. Yeah, so I go 10 pin, 2-8, so I barely hit the head pin. And then when I come back on this lane again, I 3-6-10. So my mindset is, okay, this lane, I don't have a problem with the right lane. And again, barely making a spare, just like I did that 10 pin earlier. So this left lane, I'm really having issues with. No issues with the right lane at all. So I'm actually going to make a pretty big move here. I 4-2'd to the left. So my thought process there was I wanted to get away from any carry down that might have been a little earlier, as well as any earlier friction. Like, obviously, depending on who you're following or what balls they were throwing, it could really make a pair tricky. So I actually had this pair here. I'm gonna pause it real quick. I actually had this pair 6-3 different. So I was 6-3 further left on the left lane as I was to the right lane. Like, I didn't miss at all on the right lane. Obviously, the left lane was giving me issues. So going back to what I was saying, like, depending on who you're following, that can really play a major role. I knew there was free friction in the middle, so I said, okay, I'm going to make a move, do a little bit of a hand trick, get around it a little bit more, and it actually ended up paying off, and I struck when I needed to just finish the game off. I'm pretty happy with 228 as a grind game, getting me to 143 over going into game number 4. So at this point, I knew that, I put up a decent set for the first 3. So this format and the pattern that you're bowling on, it makes it more of a sprint than a marathon. So you usually hear it the other way around. Like, It's a marathon, not a sprint. But with this format only having 6 games, you can't give any pins away like I just did there. Missing single pins are just not tolerated. Like, it shouldn't be tolerated at all. So it's a marathon, not a sprint. So, like, one bad game puts you out of it pretty fast. So 740 for the first 3, extremely happy with that. So it's a matter of taking one shot at a time and really committing to good shots. I was extremely happy with how I threw it this game, like thinking about or having those things in mind. Like, you never want to press. I kind of want to talk about that real quick. You never want to press, but you also have to sort of keep in mind what you have going on. So this shot here is another example of, 1, taking advantage of the pattern, and 2, having the right ball in your hand. When we see, like, the pros, granted, they're professionals for a reason. They're masters at their craft, and they can split dimes for forever. But they're not splitting dimes every single time. They're close, but they're not hitting the same spot every single time. So my point is, these guys know enough about ball motion. They have the right people watching them to where they have the right ball in their hand. So when they do miss, like I do on this shot, you can notice that, like, this shot is way in. Like, it's not projected at all and just kind of lays there. Having the right ball in your hand is, like, number 1. Like, if you don't have the right ball in your hand, then you're probably not going to be striking, and you're probably not going to be anywhere near the top where you want to be. So, yeah, having the right ball in your hand is massive, and really a key into success on the lanes. And it's kind of hard to, understand, like, especially when you have, 10 or 5 minutes of practice. I believe they actually gave us 5 minutes of practice for this event. So if you're concerned with getting loose, trying different balls, and then realizing which ball is going to give you the best chance to strike, then it's a lot to think about. So what I'll tell you is really have trust in your equipment. Like, for me, I've been bowling really well with the Venom Shock over the last couple months, so I have massive confidence in that ball, as opposed to something else in my bag that I might have 3 games on. So going back to what I was saying about the Shock, in practice, I knew by looking at, the lanes and, a couple shots that I threw before that, it's like, okay, I got enough free friction to where the Shock is going to hook. So I just have to really get lined up with it. So I tried it, and obviously it worked. So we'll go ahead and continue on. That was a long ramble for throwing a bad shot. So up again on the left lane, you can see how much further right that I get that one compared to on the right lane. Get it past 10 down lane. So I got the right ball in my hand. That's a good thing. So again, like, I'm continually moving left as I'm seeing the ball sort of transition the way it is. And that ball right there, I actually tried a different shock. So I'm going to rewind to here. Both shots were close, but they go through the pins considerably different. So this is the first shot of the 10th. Barely gets the 10 out. But here, if you sort of watch just past my head where the ball exits the pin deck, it was exiting right about where the 8 pin is. This is a different shock. This shock is drilled the exact same way, but it has a different surface on it. So, like I said, the shock that I was throwing and have been throwing for the last 4 games started at 2,000, and as we know, the surface on these balls will change the minute it hits the lane. So if I was to guess, it was probably actually closer to 4,000, 4,500, if not stable by the time that we got to the end of game 4. But this shock that I'm throwing here is actually about 5,000 grit. So, and it's a different ball. It was, I believe this was actually the very first shock that I drilled, probably about 1.5 years ago. And you can see like the shape is completely different. Like it just kind of bails. So obviously I'm not going to throw that one. I'm going to stick with the shock that I was in. So 256, that game gets us to 199 over, averaging just shy of 250. So this is where the train kind of derails. Now at the end of the game, you might be like, well, you shot that. I mean, I wouldn't say the train derailed, but this game, Game 5, and then Game 6 kind of tie into each other. So the first shot on the right lane, I 310, then get up on the left lane and light strike, and then that shot goes through the pins pretty well. So my look on the left lane, and that was a weird 4-pin, by the way. My look on the left lane seems like it's kind of going away. Like that shot wasn't terrible. And then I get up on the left or the right lane and do the exact same thing that I just did. And if you notice, this shot on this lane, it hooked a lot. Like I did not think it was going to strike, but it did. So with that being said, I should have made a move here, and I didn't. Because when I get up on the right lane again, I proceed to throw the exact same shot, and this time I'm not rewarded for it, and I pay the price. So hindsight's 2020. I should have made a move, didn't, but that's okay. So that one I didn't like. That lane, that's the lane that was not hooking, but I actually got that one to the right early, and it ended up hooking just fine. So I make the move. On that lane, 2-1, and get back into the pocket. So, spoiler, I take this game off the sheet. Now, I'm telling you that because when we get to the fill, this is where, like I mentioned, I'm able to reflect on what I did, what I should have done, and some things I wish I would have done differently. So I still throwing the same shock that I've been throwing for 5 games, and here I'm throwing the stealth. I switched to the stealth just to get another look at it. So keep in mind this ball has 1 shot on it, and still has almost fresh surface on it that was 2,000 grit as well. So I've got a ball that's I know is gonna blend out the friction, but how much it's gonna hook is really up in the air. I don't know if it's just going to bail, if it's going to continue at all. So I went ahead and tried it. Obviously, my shock that I threw on the last pair didn't look good, so I said, okay, I'm going to try the shot or the stealth here. And same kind of shape, that controllable, continuous ball motion. So I try it here, and I just bury it, like absolutely buried. So the problem here is, I'll go ahead and put that up. So I'm 233 over. So I'm in a really, really good position. The problem is I just went back 7 for 230. So you might be saying, well, what's wrong with that? Like, who cares? You just keep going. The problem is when I get to the next pair, which I start in the shock. And that was the first mistake. So I start in the shock, throw a good shot for the first one, and it kind of goes off the rails from there. Like that was just a bad shot, 2, 4, 8, 10. So I think, and I could be wrong, but I like to think that my mindset is okay, or correct most of the time. I feel like I should have thrown the stealth this game. Now, when you think about it in the moment, it's like, okay, you're 230 over through 5 games. You're almost averaging 250. So why make a ball change? And I proceeded to miss another single pin. Why make the ball change? It just seems to me like as I'm going through this footage, kind of looking at it, figuring out what I did good, what I did wrong. I think as I was bowling, I did not have as much room with the shock. And looking at the score here, I go strike, open, double, open, 3-bagger. So like I'm hitting the pocket. I'm just, 1, I missed a single pin, 2, I split off a bad shot. So I guess like there's really 2 ways to look at it. Yeah, you had the right ball in your hand. Your execution just wasn't good the last game. The other way to look at it is, yeah, you should have gone into a different ball and just trusted it. But like I said, going back 7 for 230, yeah, I don't know if I want to make a ball change there. But those are just some things to think about. Like when you're in a moment like this where strikes are necessary. A bad game could put you out of it, but you want to make the right decision. So what I'll tell you is, if I had to redo all of this, I would have went to the stealth this last game and just finished it out from there. And I think that would have been a lot better overall for me, just looking back at it, like now we're 5 days later. But again, like in the moment, you kind of just you're going with the flow. Like you're bowling really, really well, so you stick to what's working. And that's what I did. And honestly, like that never hooked. I think the stealth would have hooked. But anyways, that's okay. I'm just rambling to sort of give you my mindset. Then, like you saw here, I'm clearly frustrated. I'm clearly frustrated. So execution just goes out the window for the 10th frame, which if I get all 3 in the 10th here, I'm leading the event right now. But, obviously you don't know that at the time, but it is what it is. I do think, if I make those makeables, if my execution is way better the last game. Like my execution was poor. If I was to rate it on a scale of poor to great, I would say it was poor. Like a couple shots that were not even close, so you can't really get mad about it. But a couple shots that weren't even close, so it is what it is. I mean, at the end of the day, I'm extremely happy with how I performed at the event. And here's sort of the breakdown of the event itself. So I struck 71% of the time, which I would like to think is a lot. But if you go down to opens, I had 5 opens, so almost one per game. And this app actually gives you a calculation if you picked up all of the single pins. So I missed 2 single pins, both 10 pins and to the right. If you pick up all the single pins, you average 242.5. And we do the calculation for that. That gets me to 1455, which at the time of recording this video is leading by roughly 10. So that makes a massive difference. So if you're to take anything from this video, I know it's beat into our heads all the time as bowlers, but make your spares. Like, making your spares the difference between a possible $25,000 and maybe $1,000. It's a massive difference. And then, going back, if you have the ability to do something like this, and shout out to the PBA for live streaming all of the pairs at the LBC event. If you have the ability, go back and watch your footage here. Go back and watch, how you bowled, how you, dealt with the downs and how you dealt with the ups. I could tell you, like I had mentioned, like when I two-pinned, I was on full tilt, like, because I knew it slipped from my hands, because I knew I had the opportunity to bowl really, really well and put up a number that, could have lasted. One quick side note while I'm editing this video, I know this last game I did not throw it very well. Execution was not there, but going back to what I said earlier, having the right ball in your hand could be the key to striking and not striking. But that obviously didn't happen, and then my shot making was impacted the last frame when I needed it most. But it is what it is, and this is just how we grow and how we continue to get better. But for this entire event, I threw the same ball. Like I said, I could have really done one of two things last game: stick with that ball or go to the other ball, the stealth. But I went with my gut, and it didn't work, which that's fine. We learn for next time. But if you like this format, let us know down in the comments something new that we put together here. I kind of like, walking through my process of sort of what I'm thinking and things I could have done differently, because that's how we grow bowling, is through education. So if you have any more questions, need more information, check us out at ccdbowling.com. Dustin Zander with Creating the Difference. Have a great day.